Hey folks, welcome to Unqualified, the fantasy football podcast that's been pulling it to the left, but slicing it to the right, resulting in a perfect drive down the fairway since 2017. I'm your producer, Rob Diesendorf, here with Sean Brady and Scott Johnson, two fantasy football rivals that have been sabotaging each other for years, but they decided to come together to help you win your league and make your friends look like idiots. How's it going, fellas?
Great, and it's golf season. It's fantasy football mock draft season. It's golf season, and I would just, for those you cuties out there, I would be on the lookout for some slow-mo videos of the, I don't know how to describe it, the illustrious day that we had last weekend.
Oh, we hit the links. We hit the links with hashtag Neil, and it was glorious. I actually
hit the range.
It was my second ever time swinging a golf club. I had gone like once as a kid to the driving range, but I got some pointers from my fellow podcasters, and of course hashtag Neil. And I think I'm ready to challenge Tiger Woods in the U.S. Open next year. What do you guys think?
Ready to take your talents to South Beach?
The PGA Tour. Just be ready.
A couple more times on the driving range, and you'll be there. But speaking of challenges, we did the Happy Gilmore challenge while we were there. I did, and I absolutely crushed the ball. Absolutely crushed it.
Yeah, he spanked it. He spanked it out there.
I don't think it ever came back down to earth.
Good spank.
But I'd like to take this moment to extend that Happy Gilmore challenge to our listeners, to the UQDs.
I like the sound of that.
If you're out there, you go to the range, or you're on the golf course, do the Happy Gilmore challenge, take a video of it, send it to us, and we'll post the best ones on the Instagram or the Twitter, wherever we get them, and we'll see if it's better than mine. I think we'll probably post mine too.
Felt bad for that ball, man. You really smacked that to smithereens. I don't know how you make contact with it too. Like right on. It only took like 3 tries.
I just blacked out. I don't know how it happened.
It was pretty good. You have a slow-mo video of that, right?
I do.
Yeah,
we'll post that.
We
have for those who don't know what that
build up that one though. That one's like the last one we put up there.
For those who don't know what the Happy Gilmore challenge is, you shouldn't even be listening to this podcast. Just go away. I'm not even going to explain.
See you later.
Mm-hmm. But aside from golf, we are talking about draft strategies today.
Yeah, we are. Giving our top 5 tips to help you win your league in 2019 and make your friends look like idiots. But in all seriousness, Sean and I differ on some things. We sabotage each other on certain things. But draft strategy, we're pretty lock in step. So going to go over 5 separate rules to kind of live by when you're mock drafting and when you're doing your real draft for this upcoming season.
Hell yeah. Love it.
Live Moss.
Okay, we're going to start with rule number 1 for your draft strategy, and this is a rule every year, regardless of what the situation is. Don't get cute. Very simple rule. This could be taken very literally, or you could take it very philosophically. Very literally, don't get cute. Don't take a defense or a kicker before the second to last and last round, or maybe the third to last and second to last round. That's the only time you take defensive kicker. And then another thing I'll add in, don't draft guys that you plan on trading later. Don't take a third quarterback before you fill out your starting lineup, or a second quarterback before you fill out your starting lineup, because you want to trade him to someone else. Nobody wants to trade for a quarterback that you took in the 5th round. That's how it goes. The value depreciates as soon as you take him. So don't draft kickers and defenses early, and don't draft guys with the intention of trading them. Draft guys you want on your team. Don't get cute.
Yeah. It's basic economics, supply and demand. If you stock up with 3 quarterbacks and 3 tight ends, and you have one quasi-starter at running back and 1 bench guy, and you're trying to trade for a running back, but everyone knows you really need it, they're not going to trade with you. You're not a good trade partner then. So yeah, I would say I always load up. We'll get to this in a little bit, but 6 position players, meaning 6 either running back, wide receiver, and tight end groupings, or running back and wide receiver before I even think about a quarterback. This year, the only quarterback I'd be thinking about in like round 6 or 7 is Deshaun Watson, and he's going around 60th, 65th overall, so that is like round 6 or 7. And I would think about taking him there, but everyone else I would wait around at least and really fill out your roster before that. Don't get cute with that.
Yeah, and don't also like pick only based on their projection.
Yes.
Again, those are projections.
100%.
You like not getting cute means like you know what players are like based on what they've done in years past. Now, it's not obviously the end all be all, but if you're picking someone because they didn't do well on one team and they just landed on a new team and it's a little bit of a better situation, it's still not. They might be the same old player. You want to pick guys that you know can get the job done.
Yep. And like for example, like running back wise, like Devonta Freeman is going up. He's the 27th ADP, so he's going to like late round 3 kind of thing. So let's say you take 2 wide receivers to start in rounds 1 and 2, and then you're thinking like, oh, Devonta Freeman was like top 5 a couple years ago. Tevin Coleman's out of the picture now. He's going to be a bona fide starter, top 5 running back again. And you try to get cute with it instead of taking Nick Chubb, who was on a heater last year, who would probably be better this year. Don't get cute and take Devonta Freeman. He now has a new offensive coordinator, injury prone. They're going to pass a ton with their new offensive coordinator, who was the Bucs coach last year. So, and another thing, don't get cute with rookies. Obviously, the projections are there, but they're rookies. We have no idea how well they're going to do. College production is no sign of how they're going to do in the pros. So that's another thing. Don't get cute with like drafting 3 or 4 rookies because they're projected high. Like Royce Freeman last year is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, if you're going to take a rookie, wait till later in the draft where the consequence for missing is much lower. Don't take a rookie in like round 3 unless you're absolutely sure he's going to be the guy that gets it done for you. So in total, just don't get cute. When you get cute, that's when you start to beat yourself up later in the year.
Yeah, one quick point before we move on that. Josh Jacobs is like the top rookie running back this year, and he has a ton of contract disputes right now. So we'll see more of it on Hard Knocks. Maybe they're doing that for Hard Knocks, but even he's not like a bona fide starter for your team. And he's getting drafted as like people's second running back. Maybe take an Aaron Jones or Damian Williams, who is a little more established there, instead of taking a flyer on Josh Jacobs and getting cute. Rule number 2. It's pretty similar to don't get cute, but this is specifically for quarterbacks. We want to wait on quarterbacks. So every single year, there's always someone that reaches for an Aaron Rodgers or Andrew Luck in round 2, 3, 4. Maybe Pat Mahomes this year, who's going around like 4 or 5. And more often than not, the repeatability of a quarterback to be in the top 2 or 3, as they were the year before, it's not established. There's stats behind guys with a ton of upside late, like Carson Wentz 2 years ago or Pat Mahomes last year, like we said, that pays off to the extreme. So we want to wait on quarterback. And the other thing is the difference, the average difference between the first and the 10th quarterback compared to the first running back and 10th running back is huge. There's not as much difference. Maybe the first and second quarterbacks, there's some difference. They kind of establish themselves as top scorers in that position. But like the third quarterback and the 8th quarterback last year, which was off the top of my head, Matt Ryan and like Phillip Rivers or something like that, the difference game to game, week to week was not that much, where it's not going to make or break your week. So you can get away with taking Phillip Rivers 6 rounds later than you would have Matt Ryan and still gotten pretty good production out of them.
Yeah, and like we talk all the time about how we toot our own horn a lot here, but we talk about how we told you guys to take Wentz 2 years ago. We told you about Mahomes last year. Like we nailed it. We hit home runs with those calls. But and that's great. And like if you followed us on that, you probably love us. You're probably waiting for the next thing this year. But I'm here to tell you, you don't even really need to hit the home run on a late quarterback to still get value there. Like there's so many starting caliber guys again this year. There's probably even more than there were last year. You know, Wentz is back. Baker is now joining the elite ranks. Kyler Murray might even be a viable option. We see guys last year like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, who you didn't need to draft, that could have been starting maybe top 5 ceiling guys for down the stretch last year. You don't need to spend an early pick on quarterback. And to give you an idea of what that looks like, just kind of like the rough space of where these guys were drafted last year, you could probably have wound up with Aaron Rodgers, and then later on in the draft taking a guy like Devin Funchess, as opposed to if you spend that early Rodgers pick on a guy like Robert Woods and you take Phillip Rivers late, you're sitting pretty. You'd much rather have that second combo of Woods and Rivers, because not only does it sound like a great camping trip, they were a much better combo than Aaron Rodgers and Devin Funchess. The caliber of player that you're going to get out of your quarterback late is much better than the caliber of skill position guy.
Yep. I love that. You're only going for dart throws later on, like Devin Funchess was last year. I was totally wrong on him, but yeah, you want to maximize the value you have consistently throughout. Quarterback is always one to wait at least until round 7. And again, Deshaun, I'm not taking Pat Mahomes this year just because there's going to be regression, and Tyreek Hill, there's so much uncertainty, maybe only suspended 3 or 4 games, but still a lot going on there. And running situation is a little worse than last year, so I'm not spending any early pick on him, but Deshaun Watson is the second guy pretty much getting drafted, and he's going round 6 or 7. I would take him there if I feel really good about my running backs, wide receivers, and maybe tight ends in rounds 1 through 5 or 6.
So you're telling me don't pick a QB right away?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's always, but the thing is, now this has always worked out for me. Picking a really good QB, on my first pick, that's always what I've been doing. But I'm also, my strategy is I don't have a strategy. It's kind of nuts. Well, I picked Aaron Rodgers first last year.
Well, I would
Don't
say,
you think that's really important to get somebody who's going to be throwing the ball all the time, doing a really good job?
I mean, it is. I would say you didn't pick him with your first round pick, but you were the first one to take a quarterback with Rodgers last year. I would say, it's tempting to say quarterbacks score the most points, because they do. They also touch the ball the most, and in the real NFL, they're the most important position. But if you're playing in a one quarterback league, which I would say probably 75%, maybe 85% of fantasy players are, like Scott said before, the difference between Aaron Rodgers and Cam Newton, Carson Wentz, and Phillip Rivers, who are the bottom of the top 10, all three of those guys they were getting it done, just like Rodgers was, as opposed to if you picked I'm trying to think of a wide receiver going in that range. I can't. Maybe Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore last year, that. Those guys were awful. You couldn't start them. There's more starting caliber quarterbacks out there.
Yeah, and I'll give you 2 reasons, Rob, to answer your question, and then I'll give you an example to bring it home. This is a passing league now, so compared to 8-10 years ago, where you had 3 quarterbacks over 4,000 yards and 2 quarterbacks with over 30 touchdowns, now it's commonplace, right? If your quarterback's not getting that done, even Matt Stafford, not last year, but in previous years, and Derek Carr, those guys have gotten 4,000 yards, 35 touchdowns, and they're not, obviously they're household names because they're franchise technically quarterbacks, but they're not household fantasy names. They're not even getting drafted this year, for example. So it's a passing league now. It's more commonplace for so many more quarterbacks to be good. And that's why 2 quarterback leagues are getting more and more popular. And then the rushing ability of a lot of quarterbacks nowadays, again, 10 years ago, 2008, the only one I could think of off the top of my head was Cam Newton wasn't even drafted yet. It was maybe Mike Vick. That was the only rushing quarterback. And I don't even know if he was back in the league at that point. Donovan McNabb comes to mind, but he wasn't a rush first quarterback. Now you have all these young guys, Kyler Murray, Cam Newton.
Different time.
And they have Lamar Jackson. They have these rushing abilities which pad their stats, Josh Allen, and that helps kind of fill in that gap too.
Yeah, I would say so. Long story short, I think the best strategy for anybody quarterback-wise is to take a safe starter in round 7, 8, or 9. There's plenty of guys going in that range. You're probably looking at a little bit of an older guy in that range. And then you get an upside second quarterback, one of the guys that runs a lot, like Scott just mentioned, in rounds 11, 12, or 13, just on the off chance that they explode and become a league winner. So you're covered, and then you have a shot at being you might get your Pat Mahomes breakout with your second guy.
Yeah, I love that. And then I'll give you one quick example too to bring that home, Rob, for you. So obviously. Yeah. When you're drafting a quarterback high, the expectations are that they're going to replicate the year before, and they did so well that you're expecting that same production or more. I'll give you Matt Ryan as an example. I'm looking at his career stats right now, so I'm going to go 2015, 16, 17, 18 in that order. 2015, 4,500 yards on average, about 21 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. So therefore, after that year, he wasn't even getting drafted in 2016. He was an MVP candidate in 2016. They got to the Super Bowl that year and lost to the Patriots. He had almost 5,000 yards, 38 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, which is, I think he was second overall in quarterbacks that year. Then he moved to, so therefore, the next year after that, he was getting drafted high, right? In 2017. Mm-hmm. 2017, barely 4,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Another crappy year by his standards. And again, people were expecting the same production. He almost had half the amount of touchdowns that he did the year before. So then it flip-flop again. Going into 2018, wasn't getting drafted. And then all of a sudden last year, he had almost 5,000 yards again, 35 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, which is another almost MVP caliber season. So it's just unpredictable. It's scheme changes. It's offensive coordinator changes. That's why we went over the coaching carousel last week to give you an example of like what's going to change. But you can't rely that much on some guys like Matt Ryan.
Okay.
Rob's still picking Aaron Rodgers in like round 2. I could tell.
Hey, go for it.
I'm still going to pick.
I'll take a skill
the
position
best
guy
quarterback
there
I can find immediately.
I'm going to spend the whole year trying to trade for Pat Mahomes from Rob in every league that Rob takes Pat Mahomes in. It's going to be
change my view.
It's going to be excruciating. Okay, let's look at rule number 3, and this one it's a pretty interesting one. There's a lot of different ways to attack a fantasy draft, but this is one that I think Scott and I share, and it definitely has helped us over the years. You want certainty early, and you want to take dart throws late. Meaning, you don't want to F around in the beginning of your draft. You want to pick guys in the early rounds that you know are going to be there every week getting the job done. I'll throw one little caveat here. We say this all the time, and it definitely is true, but if you screw up your early pick, like maybe even your first-round pick, it's not the end of the world. It may feel like it. It's probably one of the worst feelings. Like a couple years ago, I picked David Johnson first overall, and he promptly got hurt in week 1, and like it was debilitating for my season. But I actually wound up making the playoffs and making a run all the way to the semifinals, regardless of missing that first-round pick. So it doesn't kill your season, but you definitely don't want to put yourself in that type of situation regardless. So you shouldn't just swing for the fences early. You want to pick guys early on that you know you can count on. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I agree. I'll give you examples for this year. Some rookie running backs. So we have Miles Sanders on Philly, who's getting drafted like round 6 about on ADP, average draft position. And then Darrell Henderson on the Rams, who's getting drafted around round 9 or 10. To me, what I'd much rather have, instead of having to rely on Miles Sanders as my second or third running back because he's getting drafted so high, I'd rather take a surefire wide receiver in that range, maybe a Jarvis Landry, maybe a DJ Moore, one of the Mike Williams, I think is gonna have a big breakout. I'd rather have one of those guys that can fill in my flex position instead of having to rely on Miles Sanders to have that production. Kind of like what a lot of people did with Royce Freeman, and myself included last year.
Yeah.
As opposed to taking a dart throw on a Darrell Henderson in round 9 or 10 after you have one of those surefire wide receivers earlier. Because I'll tell you the wide receivers around Darrell Henderson's range: Christian Kirk, Corey Davis, Will Fuller. I don't want to rely on any of those guys as my flex. And then if you have one of them with Miles Sanders, like that's not filling out your roster effectively.
Absolutely. This makes me think of, I'm going to take a quick little segue here. I have a couple of my friends, we all coach lacrosse. I don't know why I can't talk right now. And once in a while, you'll get a player that, is just not very good. And we refer to them as this is going to get me in a lot of trouble probably. Refer to them as what we call the grocery stick, which means that when you see the kids lined up on the sideline, the grocery stick is the kid that is placed to separate the defensive players from the offensive players. And you're like, kind of like when you use the grocery stick to check out. Oh yeah, it happens. I'm taking you under the hood of the coaching world.
Hilarious.
So
wow.
I would say for this purpose, like in your fantasy draft, I think your quarterback selection is your grocery stick. I think before you take your quarterback, you want certain starters that are going to get the job done. And then once you take your quarterback, you're picking guys, kind of like you put your nice staple ingredients for your meals down on the runway. You put your grocery stick, and then you take some dart throws. Maybe you put like the gum that's calling your name on the checkout line. Like that's where you throw your darts.
The Twix bar.
After you get that quarterback, probably I would say rounds like 8, 9, and then all the way through the end of the draft. That's when you're taking big swings.
Love that. Grocery stick. Wow.
Hashtag grocery stick. Let's get it trending, people.
I love
in
that.
the channels.
All right, grocery sticks aside, let's go into rule 4, which is we're going to talk about tight ends. Now, Sean and I differ a little bit here. He's saying to prioritize tight end. I'm saying not to, but it has bitten me in the ass. Most recently last year with Kyle Rudolph. So, Sean, what do you, in terms of like tight end this year, obviously Gronk is retired. You have the big three, just Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, and then George Kittle in that order pretty much, which is like round 2, 3, and 4 respectively. If you're not grabbing one of those guys, what are you doing with tight end?
Well, the biggest thing with tight end is I'm thinking that I had a really rough year on every team that I didn't have George Kittle, Zach Ertz. Those are the two that I did own last year. I had one team I didn't have either, and it was not fun trying to plug in. I had Eric Ebron for like a week. I wound up dropping him like the worst time. It was brutal.
Oh, I remember that.
And like you don't want to be messing around because there's not very many like starting caliber tight ends. It's actually I think the only position in fantasy where there are less starting caliber players than the amount of teams there will be in your league. Like there's going to be teams in your league that don't get a starting caliber tight end, in my opinion. Some guys feel great about some other players, but for me, if that means spending a late round 2 pick on Travis Kelce or a 3rd or 4th round pick on Kittle or Ertz, I'm doing that just because I will never have to worry about it for the rest of the year. And if not, I mean, the tier below is not too shabby either. I definitely don't want to get stuck with like the 9th or 10th tight end off the board because I didn't take one early. So that's what I mean when I say prioritize tight end. If the value doesn't make sense, like say you have a late 1st round pick, like you're not going to touch Travis Kelce. You're not going to get him in the end of the 3rd round. So it's got to make sense for you.
Right.
But it sucks when you don't have a good one. That's what I'll throw out there. I'm going to try to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And you look at like Eric Ebron and O.J. Howard last year, they weren't getting drafted, but it's kind of rare to have 2 guys like that come out of nowhere in a year and like provide some production. The only thing that kind of scares me is Hunter Henry, O.J. Howard, Eric Ebron, these guys. I love Jared Cook where he's getting drafted like round 9. I think I would take him in round 7 or 8, like as the grocery stick after I take my quarterback. Oh, yeah. But O.J. Howard, Eric Ebron, Hunter Henry, they're it feels like they're getting overdrafted. Hunter Henry and O.J. Howard especially, and I like what they're gonna. I think they're gonna do this year. I like, but taking a round 6 or 7 pick on them, it seems like a stretch. So I feel like I'm still gonna wait. I don't know, another round or 2, but I'm gonna look at Jared Cook early and often, O.J. Howard as well if he falls a little bit, Hunter Henry if he falls, Eric Ebron the touchdown production is not going to sustain, so maybe Jack Doyle late, but I don't want to be stuck with like a Vance McDonald around 10 or 11. So I agree. The other thing that tight end is kind of susceptible to is if they're on a bad team, they usually don't do well. So Evan Engram, Delaney Walker, what are you doing with those guys this year?
Oh, man. I feel like Evan Engram, just based on the fact that OBJ is now out of the picture, actually could have a sneaky good year. Delaney Walker, I used to love this dude, but I don't want any part of him now because I think the Titans are going to be a mess. So I would say Engram, I'm more willing to take the risk on, especially if for me to have to be looking at him, I probably screwed up early in the draft because I probably missed out on Jared Cook or O.J. Howard.
Right.
But, there's worse things in the world than picking a guy that is uber talented and just kind of was overshadowed in years past. Walker, though, I want no part of. He broke down last year, and that team is going to be really, really bad. All right, so kind of building right off what Scott just said about picking tight ends on bad teams, in general, this is rule number 5. We want to pick guys on good teams and avoid bad ones. And that might seem super obvious, but this might be the most important tip of all. It's not fun owning players on bad teams, and I can attest to this myself. I actually consciously picked LaShawn McCoy on the Bills over Tyreek Hill last year, and I legitimately was depressed on the first week of the fantasy season because I realized what a big mistake that was.
That was his big Tyreek Hill's big game too.
I feel like that's going to be tattooed on my brain for the upcoming draft season, and that's a good thing because that means I'm going to stick with great, consistent offenses like the Falcons, Saints, Chargers, Rams, Chiefs, Eagles, Colts, Steelers. There's legitimately 8 teams right there that you probably want any piece of that offense if you can, because guys on those teams are going to more often than not put up big numbers.
Absolutely, and I learned this firsthand too last year. I'll give you an example. I had Kenyon Drake, who was on the Dolphins, and the Dolphins were just like a low-key dumpster fire last year, and I was just expecting production over and over again from him, and meanwhile, I had Dalvin Cook, but I also had Latavius Murray that I was just benching all year, and this is a full-point PPR, and like I would bench Kenyon Drake when he would have a big game, but it was just like every third or fourth game. Like it was just brutal because like they were up in that game, and so yeah, avoid Jaguars, Titans, Bills, Giants, Redskins, Dolphins, Bengals. Breakout contenders this year: Cowboys, Browns, 49ers, Bucks. Those can have some pretty solid bounce back in terms of like the teams and guys to target in those teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you pick the team that's going to break out on offense at the right time, like 2 years ago, if you had some Rams players, like you were probably sitting pretty because you got them at a very unique value. For me, I think
Bears
that might be like exactly. That might be like the Cowboys and the Niners this year. I feel like the Bucks, most people are kind of keyed into, and the Browns, people are definitely going crazy about them. But if you look at the Cowboys and the Niners, if they make a big jump and you get some of their skill guys at a nice value, that's going to help your team overall. And I would say Dante Pettis, even Randall Cobb, like you made the case for last week.
Yeah.
Like you kind of talked me into him, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the player.
Ooh.
And the biggest
That's
thing I would
you
say,
take like the very last, and then you take your like defensive kicker and like around earlier, so you get the best ones.
Exactly.
That's an example of that.
I would say the other thing is if you're going to pick a player that's not on a great, consistent offense, at least make it one that's like a professional offense with a good offensive coordinator, good quarterback, like the Texans, the Packers. I think we're desperately hoping the Jets join this category next year, but we'll see. You want players on teams that are going to move the ball consistently, because even if they're not the player moving the ball, they're going to be in chances to score. They're going to be on the field more often. Like that's what you want your players to be. That's the type of situation you want them to be in.
Couldn't agree more. 5 solid rules. Well, those are 5 rules to live by, to live Moss by. Made up by 2 fantasy football rivals that aren't sabotaging each other today for you guys.
We came together.
I Quiero a QB the first round. That's really good.
We Quiero to draft with you, so you do that and leave.
I just Quiero.
Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco round 1. That's who you want.
Maybe Drew Lock too.
exactly.
You need his backup. You need to handcuff him.
Rule number 6: take Joe Flacco and Drew Lock round 1 and 2 if your name is Rob.
Rob Diesendorf.
Aaron Rodgers hasn't failed me yet, so
Yeah, let us know what you think. Any other rules that we want to add in that you could live Moss by for your draft? Let us know in the channels, and also let us know what you think of our golf swings. We're going to keep on improving that throughout the season for y'all, you cuties too.
I'll be wearing the victory red. Don't worry. Always.
Big Tiger guy.
don't miss us too much.
Well,
Moss.
See you later.
later.